Welcome to the Plant Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Series 12 of the Plant Based Podcast is sponsored by People, Plants, Wellbeing. This is the place where you can find your magic through the power of plants and nature. Relax at a nature immersive retreat, wellness day, forest bathing walk, or why not contact the studio about a tailored team day for your work colleagues' wellbeing. Later in the episode, we'll be giving you an exclusive discount code for all podcast listeners, and this can be used for money off People, Plants, Wellbeing services. Find out more about Nature-Based Wellbeing Studio at peopleplantswellbeing.com or on Instagram under People, Plants, Wellbeing. Andrew J. Woodhouse seems to have a dream job. He's the head gardener at the recently opened Embassy Gardens. You know, that building with that really cool swimming pool on top, which I might have mentioned a few times. I've been healthily obsessed with this area for a while now, especially for its planting, and I was really eager to chat to the botanical boss of the whole site. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing? This is your first official podcast, I think you said.
It
right?
is indeed,
Yeah?
so excuse me if I'm a little nervous.
No, you're absolutely fine, man. Well, let's relax you by telling us about your background. Now, I did a little Google of you, and I found you got quite a CV, so I want you to put this background into a nutshell, please. And I know that you also grew up a little bit in East Anglia, so we're both East Anglia boys, albeit the other side of the border. You were Norfolk, I was Suffolk.
Yes. But I grew up fruit picking.
Yeah?
Over that way. Yeah. I went to boarding school out in Wyndham. Mm-hmm. And then I was at the Norwich School of Art and Design, and I wanted to become a gardener early on, but it was because my grandfather was a head gardener, and my father, I think, felt that I should do other things. It didn't happen. And it was only when I kind of tried my hand at quite a few other things that I finally, in about 2009, I was building some fancy sheds. They were zero carbon off-grid buildings.
Okay, interesting.
And I just got back from travelling, and I was a full-on environmentally aware kind of person and thought I could change the world. And, well, we did an exhibition at the London Festival of Architecture, and we put one of these pods in, and we created an orchard out of derelict land. And it was a collective of different people involved. And then someone said, well, we need someone to stay here and look after all the plants. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I can do that.
Okay.
And they were like, oh, okay. So that became the kind of highlight of how I got into it all, because I was there and I realised quite quickly that a lot of Londoners... I'm not sure I understand. Oh God. No.
Andrew just was getting a call on his phone. I'd like to think it was some hosta emergency or something.
Well, I am technically still on duty.
Yeah, exactly. So if the hostas need replanting, we might have to cancel the podcast and move on.
No, I've told everyone not to radio me, not to call me.
No worries, man.
Okay, right. No, we should be good for maybe 5 minutes.
That's cool.
So, where were we? Yes. I did the Festival of Architecture, and I was staying there for 3 months, and I was looking after all the plants that we put in, and I realised that a lot of people just didn't have an understanding of horticulture like I did, and I didn't realise that. I didn't realise that people didn't know how to grow their own food, and I just, because I obviously spent all my summers with my grandfather helping.
I think I would say the same. Yeah, I grew up with growing plants. It feels natural, but for many it isn't.
That's it. So my dad would have me in the garden doing all the chores. That was what we were expected to do. Anyway, I did that, and off the back of that, I was asked to then do another project. I was asked if I would help at a community food growing project. At the time, we had capital growth. There was a little bit of funding available. So I helped them with that. I set up a food growing project in Brixton.
Okay.
And that was a learning curve. I realised that horticulture does have the ability to heal. For a lot of people, what I call Dole syndrome, when you're at home, you're scraping by, it's hard to find something to do. So implementing horticulture in these areas I found to be really beneficial, and I would have a lot of old boys turning up, telling me what's what, but I could see how it was allowing them to kind of deal with what it was they were going through in their life. And I thought maybe there's something in this. And I then took a very keen interest in horticultural therapy. And I went on from there to go and work for a charity, which was a charity that had over 40 hostels in and around London. And they asked if I could please implement a gardening program working within the hostels. And that was unfortunately underfunded, but I definitely got to see how it could benefit people. And to be honest, that in itself is probably a book.
Well, I have to be honest, that isn't a nutshell at all. That's a massive open Brazil nut. Okay. But it's all good. But then what came next? Like, how long have you been here at Embassy Gardens, which is obviously part of the big Ballamore estate? And what did you do just before it? Okay. I know your CV is very colourful.
Okay, right. Yeah, let's bring you up to date. That's a decade ago, right? Yeah. So I was a private gardener. I finally got to the point where I realised I actually need to earn some real money. Okay. And the best way to do that was to obviously work for those people that had money. Yeah. So I started to get a name for myself working privately, and through word of mouth I built up a client base. I'm very fortunate that I lived in Battersea, which is a stone's throw from Kensington and Chelsea. I had clients of a certain status, and I was a private gardener, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. I did varied work, and I was, I really enjoyed it. So I have to be careful here. So a lot of the people were of social political standing, and I
don't worry, I'm only impressed by the Minogue sisters and Sunita. So if it's neither of them, we're all good.
Well, no, well, I can say, because those that have moved on that no longer live here. So I was fortunate enough to be Rihanna's gardener.
No way.
Yeah.
I thought I wouldn't be impressed, but I really am.
There you go.
Oh my God, I've sunk into the chair.
I could put that. And and Janet Jackson as well.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't do this.
Seriously.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Janet Jackson.
Yeah. Well, then
I think I've officially lost my and we're going to have to beat that out. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was working for, let's say, the super prime end of the market. But interesting stories, like, one was... So I generally worked for a household where there was a royal family. Not our royal family, another royal family. I won't say where. And I remember when the princess was in residence, they kindly asked if we would keep our backs to the property. Wow. Which, if you've ever mowed a lawn...
Oh, my God.
...is a bit tricky. Wow. So you can imagine... We're pushing... Well, I'm there mowing the lawn, pushing it forward, and then having to drag it back. And
that's an experience. Oh, my gosh.
And things like that. Oh. But actually, that's quite standard practice.
But this is a world that many of us wouldn't even imagine or comprehend.
No, it's still there. And it almost felt like how it might have been in a formal house where you have gardeners.
Wow.
So, yes... But a lot of the time I wouldn't, just because I was someone's gardener, it wouldn't mean I'd necessarily meet them, but I do remember once or twice, I'm cutting a hedge and then suddenly a famous face suddenly pops up in front of you and you're like, And it would often be that they were the neighbour, and they said, "Oh, I see you're doing a good job here," and you'd be like, "Yeah, okay." You know, and you got someone like Dustin Hoffman standing there. Well, not standing; it's sort of like facing you, and you'd be like, "Yes." And it's like, "Would you mind trimming this side?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Wow. It would be like that.
But did you meet Janet? I have to ask.
I didn't meet Janet. I was never introduced to Janet, but she knew I was the gardener, and it would be a nod and a hello when leaving the premises, normally in a very, swanky vehicle. And it would just be a nod. And I think often if you just get a nod, you know you're doing a good job, because you're just like, right.
Yeah, because they could easily just ignore you.
Well, and
if maybe some did, and that probably isn't nice to deal with either.
But I think if you're a gardener, it does help to have to be the sort of person that wants to please, because you want to make an impact, and if you're doing your job well, people tend to give you a little nod and say thank you.
Okay, wow. Hang on, this is still not a nutshell.
No, it's not.
Right,
okay.
So you were doing that.
So I did all that.
How did you get here?
Then we had
For someone that was nervous about doing a podcast, you seem absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't get to talk very often, do I? I mean, I am the only horticulturalist here. I'm the only
tell us
here.
about your job here. Yeah.
So after lockdown, I was like, I need to think about long term, and I need to think about stepping it up. And I thought, right, head gardener role, let me do that. So I actually did a few jobs as a head gardener. Taking on contracts, and I was like, right, I think I can do this. And then this job came up here. I had a young child. I wanted to spend more time, that sort of life-work balance as well. So I thought, this is perfect. But what a challenge! It was a big undertaking. And post-COVID, you remember a lot of the services hadn't been in place. A lot of things had fallen by the wayside, and it was like, okay, we got to come back from this,
because this development was already here. How long has this been?
It's only 6 years.
Open? 6 years.
So, well,
because to me, I only saw it 6 months ago. So to me, it was built 6 months ago. But
Well, I remember when there was nothing here.
So 6 years, right? This planting has been here a while then.
Yes, some of it. Well, no, because it's been gradual. So they were very quick to put up. They were very quick to put up Ambassador and Capital.
Yeah.
But then the Legacy and Modern, they've all come on. So Ballymore were the first to really get their foot in there and get things built. Everywhere else is only just gradually now coming online.
Okay. Yeah.
So Ballymore was the first, and I think that's because they're next to the embassy. Obviously, the American embassy is a huge part of the identity of this place. This is a civic area, so that affects the planting as well.
Okay. What does that really mean then?
Well, I think if in a civic area, you have to imagine you've got a lot of visitors, a lot of footfall, people coming through. It has to set the right tone, and understanding what that is very much. So they have their own gardeners, they have their own design. Ours needs to echo that and not be too different. So I guess that's what it is, and I think if it's just about the right tone.
Okay. And so your job here is obviously head gardener. You've got another couple of people that work here, I think you said. And a large part of your job is obviously maintaining, but also it's been kind of editing some of the planting that was here as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, there has been a lot. I mean, so major factors were during lockdown, it was decided that dogs would be allowed. So people wanted to have dogs at home in their apartments. So the toy dog thing was huge. That had a huge impact on the landscape, and I had to adjust because we were losing a lot of our tender stuff. If you imagine you've got something like digitalis, well, if you've got a lead for a dog and the dog walks around the side of the bed, that head's gone. So I had to think, okay, how can we plant this, in a way that's going to be sustainable with with
and still have it open and beautiful and not fences everywhere. Or,
completely, and you don't want to say you don't have signs everywhere saying you're not allowed here, you're not allowed there. That's not, again, because it's a civic area. People need to feel they can move freely.
So what we're talking, thorns, spikes. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, so there is a bit of that. I mean, I have put in the odd Mahonia, which I never imagined I would put in, but I actually have, because they serve serve a purpose. So I've done that also. I did pyracantha around the jacuzzi again because, we don't want people jumping over the fence and things like that. So planting has a function, and it's about designing each specific space according to the function. And I understanding what that function is.
But what I like is when I've seen the planting here, you're certainly not a plant snob like some people, because you've got that Mahonia, which we're used to seeing in parks and gardens, amenity planting, and seeing it as quite kind of almost like cheap sometimes. But the way it's used here, alongside plants that you would, inverted commas, class as classy, it works really well, and you're using a complete blend of plants with no kind of prejudgment about those plants, which I really like, because we said earlier when we walked around, you could easily have really nice grasses, Hackana kind of Verbena bonariensis, but you've shaken that up a lot more than that, haven't you, in the way you've planted here, and I love it for that.
Thank you very much. It's nice for someone to say that. Yes, I have. I've also got to think about, we need to have interest all year round. It's very easy to have interest in the summer. We are predominantly a shade. It's predominantly shade, semi-shade here. So that limits what we can do. And there's also a lot of wind because we've got a lot of tall buildings.
Yeah, how do you deal with wind? Because is there wind at ground level as well as up here on the balconies?
There can be.
It just whistles through when you've got these big towers.
So I was like saying, like the Verbena and things like that, all gets blown over, and I can't stake too much because you don't really want things lying around that children and other people might be able to grab hold of. So you need to be a little bit careful. So there's all those things to consider, and at the same time, you want to deliver good planting. And we're very fortunate in the sense that they do give me a certain amount of free rein. Obviously, I have to get everything signed off, but I sort of put forward a plan and say, this is what I'm planning on doing. A lot of it's dictated by the architecture, so I tend to go with the lime greens, and I try and incorporate as much foliage as I can. Because it's such a built-up area, so I want that contrast. So with the lime green, are you almost trying to add some light in the dark there? It's because you've got brown, so you work on the basis of complementaries. And
that's where sometimes when everyone's using this classic Haklina Cloa look, you don't get the light in those areas, do you? Because we're a bit snobby about gold leaf plants, actually, aren't we? Generally. I'm glad you're not, because I'm not. But many are.
Look, I've had it in the neck about using variegated plants.
Have you?
I had a film crew here the other day, and the people that were dressing for set all criticised the fact that I'd used marigolds.
Really?
And I was like, I mean, I get it. When I was young, and when I was, in my early days, I didn't like marigolds. Because it was something that I saw as my parents' generation, but now I love them. But they serve the purpose. So on Skypool, we put marigolds in because you've got a great big blue, and you want that fiery red.
Definitely.
You want the orange coming through. So we got the African marigold, the big yellow-headed one, along with other stuff that's sort of quite nice and pretty. But what I'm saying is, if it works, use it.
Totally.
Why not?
But is there another kind of consideration there where are you planting with different cultures in mind? Because a marigold is seen as a very different thing to some other cultures.
In India,
is this something you're then aware of? Because you've also got residents from all over the world here.
Well, I like to do that. So I've often had residents pointing out to me what plants are native to their country.
It makes them feel like home. So it's a nice touch around the place.
I'm glad you picked up on that. So that is something I am aware of, and I try and broaden my... So the thing is, it's funny. You'll get someone from New Zealand turning up and saying, "Well, that's a weed in my country."
Yeah.
And then the amount of Japanese plants that we have obviously is huge. But for me, it's what works together. And I think when you've got a lot of architecture like this, having a strong variety of plants works to your benefit.
Definitely. Yeah, and also great for the people that are spending time here. Let's talk about some of the different areas in turn. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the ravine, because this is kind of quite a showpiece. And not everybody notices it when they come to Embassy Gardens, because it's kind of tucked around the back a little bit. Tell us about that area, because it's kind of like a real fernery almost, isn't it?
It should be. I mean, it is. It's ideal to be a fernery. I mean, for people that obviously can't see it because this is a podcast, it's a courtyard, really, with a bridge going over part of it, which joins the podium gardens, but it's sunken. So it's a sink, and it's got a path going through it. Now, I've put a lot of acanthus mollusk in there, and it does really well. Lots of obviously lots of ferns. Droptrix felix Mass loves it. I've put hydrangea quercifolia, and Acer palmatums and things like that. But here's the thing: it looks great in the summer. Like, I think at the moment it looks pretty good. I mean, we've got the issue with a lot of people using it. People like to wander through it, kind of like you would a ravine. But in the winter, all the trees there are deciduous. So if you're looking out onto a space that's, mulch on the floor and so forth, then yes, you kind of want you kind of want to make sure that you've got greenery there. So I'm trying to incorporate as much evergreen stuff as I can so that it looks good all year round.
But almost like in that area, you've had to edit that a bit to kind of cope with wear and tear, because people were making their own pathway there, weren't they?
Yes.
So that's how some of these areas can be affected from time to time when it is public use area.
Yeah, that's it. So people do use it. People do walk through, and I have to adjust to that. I mean, the rule is don't put anything too small in, because it will just get stepped on. So you've got to make sure that you 10 litres above.
And that's why maybe you've been planting bigger plants as well as having that instant impact. Is because of having a robust plant to start with, isn't it? For wear and tear, yeah. Because I noticed, especially when we first came in, the area of all the Dryopterus and Hemeracalis, so densely planted. But of course, that's for durability of kind of, if you have a baby plant, it's easily going to get stepped on. I hadn't thought of that when I first came in, actually.
If you've got dogs on site, the rule is fill your beds, or otherwise the dogs are going to walk through it. So you've got to fill it up. But also, there's another trick when you're a head gardener of a estate like this is, if you know what plants you're going to use across the estate and you get the go-ahead to go and plant up an area, fill it up. You'll get immediate impact, so everyone's happy because they think, wow, and obviously the dogs don't go in it. But then also I can then thin out and use those plants later on, a couple of years later.
Brilliant trick. That's how you maximise the budget.
Exactly.
And then you've got your plants you need later.
Exactly.
That's really cool. What a quirk.
Yeah, but it's because funny enough, you'll find that when someone says, "Oh, can you uplist this area?" and you try and get those plants again.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're in a situation where they're like, "Well, we can't get them for a few weeks," and it's like, but I really need that particular variety, and they'll be like, "Well, we don't have that," and you're like, "Yeah, but I can't go outside."
So you're almost like creating your own plant library with that, aren't you?
Completely. Yeah.
Storage. It's almost how I planted my own garden up in Suffolk, because I really overplanted. But in the years to come, I will unplant it because I wanted that instant impact, and that's why everyone's always so impressed with it quickly. But I just kept planting. I didn't stop, and that's obviously what you've done here when you've then got the budget to go for it. So, can we mention just the meadow on the roof? Because you had a comment about the meadow on the roof, which was really enlightening for me. You have to cut that down, and I thought when you initially said that it was because you didn't want the seed to set on all your other plants, but it's because it causes a fire risk, right?
Yeah, so there is that, and that's come about. I mean, this is climate change. So the meadow planting on the roofs, especially if it's south-facing, it really struggles because it just dries out. So we have wonderful cornflowers right up to the beginning of sort of June, and we have poppies, and it looks incredible. And then, boom, you get 3 weeks of solid sun, or you get a week of solid sun, and then that's it. It dries right out. Now, I mean, that's normally you just leave that for hay, and it would be what it is. But you really want those plants to go to seed, otherwise you're just not. You're going to invite the invasive weeds, and you're going to do away with all your nice meadow flowers. So it is a bit tricky, but we have to cut it. So then I have to reseed. So now it's a case of, well, how can we make that work better? So we're probably going to look to incorporate a watering system. Water late at night comes on so we can keep those going. And again, that's just climate change. That's the change. I mean, policy's changed a lot on the back of Grenfell. Understandably, the awareness for fire risk is much higher. So now I think it's a case of, yes, this is the we have to adapt and change.
Yeah, and part of the learning curve of like working on a big estate that also includes high-rise planting as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
which is a big difference. But right down at ground level, and we will come to that swimming pool in a minute, but at ground level, you've got this amazing water garden, which is in front of the restaurants, and it's kind of... When I first saw it, it's not often you see such a beautiful water garden in a public place. Usually it's like a fountain or something a bit more pristine, but this is full of wildlife. It's amazing. There's a bridge through the middle as well, which I don't know how you got that past health and safety, but never mind. I had my 4x4 flip-flops on today, so that was good. But that is also teeming with wildlife, because you talked about this is actually accredited with wildlife, isn't it?
It really is. Like, the abundance is... the dragonflies and nymphs and so forth, because we have a pebble aggregate at the bottom, that creates the perfect nesting area. And the water moves very slowly, but it does move. So, unfortunately, you won't get frogs, but you will get dragonflies and so forth. And... yes, it's so good that I'm now saying, yes, we need to go for the Green Flag Award, and we need to really get this recognised. Yeah. And we're going to add to it as well. So we've got a few pocket beds off the side of the pond where we're just going to turn into sort of pocket parks. So we'll get companion planting that would naturally occur in wild areas, and just have a really small pocket where dogs, people can't go in, but wildlife can prosper. I'll probably put some sort of hurdle fencing around it and something to keep it, but I want it natural. And then we'll obviously have a ramp going into the pond so we can get ducks and stuff, because ducks are coming as well. And I've got fish in there. I've got stickleback and stuff. So
it's amazing, and the lilies are coming through. Since I've last been here, there's tons of lilies, and the yellow flower. I meant to ask you, what is the yellow little flower that's there? It's like an evening primrose. In the water.
It is. But it's good. It's very common. What is that called? That is.
I couldn't place it.
It's not rare. It's a really common.
But that combo with the water lilies, and I love that you've got all around the whole estate those pops of colour, from that to the hemerocallis with the hydrangeas by the jacuzzis as well. That was cool. So yeah, I'm loving the little pops of colour. They're really, I don't know, avant-garde way you're using plants around the whole site. And we're going to move on to the balcony garden now, which is on what floor is that on with the elevated swimming pool? Because we're here now, aren't we? Yeah.
10th floor.
And that, you've got some really lovely balcony planting there, and you've got some aloe in a pot with some bacopa.
Yes.
But they don't like the same conditions, so you're using a cool trick there, right? Tell us about that.
So, there's quite a few. So, previously, a lot of my work was dressing for sale. So, I would be working for estate agents, and they're like, make this place look good for photographs and for viewings. And I've always said, horticulture's the icing on the cake to real estate. There you go. There's a good tagline.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you should call your book when you write all about Janet's borders.
Well, she had a penthouse. I would... so, yes, there was tricks of the trade that you learn. So one with the aloes is... aloes obviously they want it as dry as possible, but they work fantastic on roof gardens in London, only in London. I would say I was a London horticultural specialist, if a specialist, but I'm definitely London centric, so I know what works in London because that's where my experience has come from.
And you need to consider plants being exposed as well, so that's
this is it. But the aloes will do okay in London. I'm not saying, I would say 4 years out of the 5 they're going to be fine. 1 year they're going to get frostbitten, or they're going to get snow settling, and that will cause damage to the leaf. But like with the aloes and the bacopa, obviously I want a trailing plant, but I want to have the aloe as the centerpiece. So the aloe is actually planted in its pot in the center of another pot. You create there's a small void where you put the bacopa, and you just water the bacopa. You don't water the aloe. And
such a cool trick.
But you can do that even if you have large... So on your balcony, often people go... There's little tricks you can do. So if you have some big pots, and I always say on your balcony, never go below 40 centimetre cubed. Because if you've got any sun, that's going to dry out in a day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everyone always goes for black, which I never understood, because... Why don't you go for white? It's far, far nicer, and I think for modern architecture, it's far cleaner as well. And certainly, if you look at hotels and things like that, we tend to go for white because it's crisp.
Yeah.
So I would say, go for light-coloured pots. If you do go for large if you're going to go for large pots, you can still plant. So you've got underplanting, but you can still put a pot on top of that pot. And the gardens that I've seen that have been rated by bodies like the RHS and have won awards, often these people have done that in their gardens. They put pots on pots on pots.
Yeah.
And you use the shade of one plant to create the microclimate from the other plant. So it's layering. And it's almost like theatre design in the sense that the traditional theatre where you have everything layered and staggered, and then it gives you that perspective you want from inside. So you design from the inside looking out. And I've gone off track again, but on the Sky Pool, it was we don't have a huge amount of space because a lot of it is for the sun lounges and things like that. But we've got some big olives up there, and underneath those olives, I've just put stuff that really appeals to the senses. So the supervarums and stuff are sculptural. We all know what they do, but they all flower. What people forget is the moment you put them outside in a nice sunny position, 50-50 horticultural grit to soil, boom, they're going to flower.
But when they flower, they must shock the public because they look like aliens, don't they?
Yeah, but this is
like, what?
But the Sky Pool is quite stark. It's grey, so you've got...
Good to have that interest,
Well, that's it. So it complements the style that we have up there. And then, obviously, around the olives, you've got a bar, effectively, for people to put their drinks on. And the idea is that you've got thyme up there, which does really well. Obviously...
I feel like there's a lot of drink garnishes up there as well. Pelargoniums, lavender.
I've heard that things like thyme are very good with gin.
Cool. Interesting. So, just kind of, we're coming to the end now. This has been really, really interesting. But one last question I want to ask is kind of about the balconies and being high up. Is there still wildlife, and kind of how are... Also, kind of added to that, how are you kind of inspiring people on their own balconies around the area in order to beautify those and bring wildlife to their balconies too?
Well, this is all in the pipeline. So first thing, post-COVID, let's get all the landscape back on track. And that's very much my remit at the moment. We've got many different areas. We've got 5 podium gardens, sunken lawn, pond, a mudlark park, linear park, ravine, so there's quite a lot, plus all the green roofs. So once they're all done, the idea is to then, I would love to have maybe the highest garden centre in London, I don't know, something like that, where people can come and find plants that would be really good for their balconies. And we can also provide the pots and the soil, because that's the other thing, it's like if you live in an apartment, you don't have a car, so how are you going to go and pick this stuff up?
Absolutely, I always say this, it's like, what are you going to do, drag the compost on the tube, you know?
This is it.
And we forget that practicality of things.
So I want to make it easier, accessible, and show people the plants that you can do, and then we can also provide a bit of an added service, so when people go away, we can go in and water, and that's really essential. So you've got to think it all the way through. You don't want to give people stuff that just ends up dying. But balconies, it's a really great opportunity to have a green balcony. It will give you that green bathing experience that you want. And it's something nice to look upon all year round.
And you still get bees 10 floors up, right?
You do. So Sky Pool, we still get the bees, we still get dragonflies popping up and going, what's this?
I don't wonder how they find it, though. How does a bee find itself 10 floors up?
I think it's the colours. And I'd be interested if you have balconies one after the other planted, they will keep going up and up and up. But we've got bees on the green roofs. The mining bees. What are they called? Anyway, they're in the sandy soil.
Okay, wow.
So there is wildlife, but the opportunity for wildlife is there. For example, we want to incorporate more back boxes. We want to incorporate as much as we can. But I think the pond is really where we're going to get it. The thing is, if you want wildlife, then just leave a place alone. But that's very difficult in a highly built-up area.
Yeah, definitely. But sometimes a little helping hand is not a bad thing either, is it? So
completely. And we do. I mean, I have enough wood pigeons, and I have wildlife that I have to tend with. Let's put it that way.
Wow. Oh my God, this has been such an interesting chat that went down a few avenues I didn't expect. Didn't expect to be talking about Janet Jackson, Rihanna, but that was an added bonus. But no, just one final thing. Tell us about your balcony at home.
Yeah, my nook.
Is that what you do with the experimenting?
Do you know what? That's a little orphanage.
Yeah,
it's a little orphanage. So that's
hospital.
Yeah. So plants that have come off the back of jobs. You get those couple left that you think, oh, I don't think they're going to make it. They're probably not good enough to go in because they're a little bit broken. And yeah, it's a collection of stuff. But my balcony is my nook.
Yeah,
and I've got a seat there, and this is what I always tell everyone. It's like, find a place where you can put your seat. You can envelop yourself in your plants.
Your sanctuary.
Your sanctuary, that's it. And just a place where you can just get away from it all. We can't all escape to the country and go and sit in a meadow. It's just, we don't have that. So I have enabled myself to have that. But it's also a play space for my son. So we grow strawberries, we've got tomatoes, cucumbers. I've got things growing there because, again, I grew up with that and I just took it for granted. I remember my father screaming at me to stop eating his tomatoes. So I've made sure we've got strawberries there, and my son goes out and he waters.
That's so important. Yeah.
But it's a balcony, and it's not a massive balcony, but my son he's got his little water thing there that he can play with, and for me to just be able to sit there, of course I chose an apartment that had good sun, so I get the morning sun. I can sit there and have my coffee, and I can listen to my podcast. I'll probably be really shocked listening to myself on this.
Well, you don't have to. It's only optional. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. This is on the Plant Based Podcast. This is one of my solo episodes, so you're very honoured to be on one of those, Andrew. But thank you. And if anyone wants to visit, they can obviously enjoy the public areas at the bottom, that lovely water garden, maybe go to the Alchemist for a breakfast wrap. I really recommend those, actually.
Yes, the Alchemist is very, very, very good. We do have some lovely restaurants. Evernight, which is an amazing. It's in the Michelin Guide.
Yeah. Wow.
If you
got
want,
my eye on that one. Yeah.
If you want something swanky, I recommend that. Yeah, but all the bars here are good. The coffee's great. But we also have, we've got a youth charity here which helps young people learn music called World Heartbeat, and they do amazing concerts, and we're looking to have them performing out on the grounds as well. So the thing is, this is a very young community. It takes decades to build a community. So, we're at the very beginning, and I'm glad to just be part of that.
Yeah, that is super. Where can people find you online?
Oh, it's the London Horticulturalist.
Perfect. Look him up. Really, really interesting work here at Embassy Gardens. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.
Hey. Welcome to the Plant Based Podcast News.
Your horticultural news roundup for the week. If you are heading to Hestercombe Gardens Country House in Somerset this year, you may want to stop on the way for a rest break because the public toilets have been temporarily closed. They have found something amazing in there, and that's a whole load of bats. It's a rather unusual event which took place overnight at the gardens, and a whole colony of lesser horseshoe bats decided to take roost in the ticket office toilets back on the 2nd of August. The brown coloured bats are the adults and the grey coloured are the juveniles, which are also known as pups. There's photographs online, you can see them on social media and in the newspapers, and it's really cool to see. But if you do want to head that way, then definitely take a rest break first.
Here's a date for your diary if you're working in the trade. It's the 51st Four Oaks Trade Show. It's being held in Cheshire on the 5th and 6th of September in a giant greenhouse. It will host hundreds of growers and horticultural suppliers from the UK, Europe and worldwide, and will also feature the best ever range of seminars and a new awards format.
great news for red admiral butterflies, as the population has soared 400% in the UK as the winter has warmed up. Sightings have risen to 170,000 so far this year as climate breakdown changes behaviour of species. So with a 400% boom in British gardens this year, have you seen any red admiral butterflies in your garden? They travel to the UK from North Africa and continental Europe, but in recent years the species has been overwintering in the UK rather than flying to warmer countries because the weather is now not too cold for it to survive. Usually the butterflies head to Britain to lay eggs in spring and then they fly back south. But they are staying here at the moment as the weather is warm. They love buddleia and they love sunflowers and lots of plants for pollinators, and we hope that you see some in your garden.
A little bit of news regarding the peat-free situation. DEFRA Minister Trudy Harrison has announced she is to stand down at the next general election following a shake-up of constituency boundaries. She had led the proposed ban of peat for 2024 for retail sales and 26 for all use. The plan has been mired in difficulties, though. Harrison spoke at the industry parliamentary reception this June, saying she would not plan to scupper any plans, but has since refused all requests for interviews.
Gardeners in the UK are being urged to watch out for the deadly Asian hornets. They've found their way over to the UK from Europe due to the record-breaking heat wave. Asian hornets are smaller than the UK's native hornet. They measure somewhere between 25 and 30 millimetres in length, but the deadly hornet species have been spotted in the Dover area of Kent. An Asian hornet nest was also found and destroyed in Devon. And while they pose no risk to human health, no more than native wasps and hornets, they do prey on honeybees and other pollinators. So keep your eye out for them and see what you can see, and report them also online if you do happen to see anywhere. Not forgetting that they really love alcohol, particularly beer and wine. So if you are having a barbecue, you might want to just cover over your glass.
And we're finishing on not just a news story, but a big mystery as well. 2 Saturdays ago, 5 people sat down for a family meal in a tiny Australian town. Within a week, 3 of those would be dead and a 4th would be fighting for life, with a 5th under investigation for potentially poisoning her guests with wild mushrooms, because out of everyone, she is the one that was not affected. This peculiar case has captured national attention, puzzled police, and left a tight-knit community reeling as well. Was it nefarious or accidental?
Series 12 of the Plant Based Podcast is sponsored by People Plants Wellbeing, the nature-based wellness studio where you can find your magic through the power of plants and nature. Take 10% off all services, treatments and retreats with our exclusive discount code for you, our podcast listeners. Use code PBP Series 12 via the website or when you contact the team to book. Next wellness days are coming up soon. Find out more and book your place at peopleplantswellbeing.com or on Instagram at peopleplantswellbeing.
The music for the Plant Based Podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.